I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, the struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
Was found a diary under the heading My Pledge. He had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for this episode of Hippocket History. I am Colby Sumner, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Brett Thomas. How you doing, bud?
Doing awesome. How are you doing?
Man, it's a good day to be in the studio
It's a
making
wonderful
some
day.
Hippocket History episodes. I'm digging it, especially this one today. It's unique because we really won't get very many more opportunities to do something like this, and like with where we're at in the narrative story. Today we're going to be covering John Brown's raid on Harpers Ferry, and the thing that kind of grabs me, because we all know this is no Gettysburg, this is no Antietam, this isn't even Wilson's Creek, this isn't anything close to
This
that.
is peacetime.
Right, peacetime. It's a very small scale. But what's very interesting to me is it is very much like an early version of a special forces raid, at least to me, from a grunt's eyes. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
you know, obviously you and I were in the infantry. We were not special forces. We have many friends that ended up doing careers in the special forces, and we've worked with the special forces many times, and that's from all branches.
Well,
Army,
we
Army,
really
Navy,
we didn't even try to camouflage or hide anything.
No. I mean, yeah. So we can only talk on this so much. You know, we know the basics of what they do, you know, for sure. And we've definitely been in combat, and I can, you know, we both can kind of educate the listener on why this is a good idea and why this is a bad idea and the realism of what you're dealing with. But we're also, just remember as we're moving forward, we are going to be comparing this to a special forces raid. There's only so much we really actually know about being on a special forces raid. Usually we were holding security.
Right.
So, anyways, let's get started here. So, obviously, we know John Brown is leaving Kansas. He's preparing to execute on this mission, his God-given mission of freeing the American slave. What's his plan?
Well, he's got a plan. It's a quick plan, quick and easy, in and out kind of deal. Harpers Ferry, he's got his eyes on Harpers Ferry. There's a huge armory there. They're building weapons, supplying most of the United States Army. He's going to get in there. He's going to grab the weapons, grab the ammo. He's going to extract out of there quickly and arm. It's a slave army that he's going to find slaves, free them, arm them, and continue to run south, plantation by plantation, growing his army and arming them.
Right. So right there's so many things we can unpack, and we won't stay too long on it. But just to, you know, his goal, he's got to get the weapons to arm the slaves he's aiming to free. So first he has to have guys to do that with, and there's all that we'll get into in a second. But in the sense that I feel like this is very relatable to like a Green Beret mission, and obviously I know that, you know, American slaves at the time were not foreign national soldiers. But that being said, they're going from having we can assume that almost none of them would ever have any kind of experience holding a gun, marching, doing things like that. Not
Right.
that they wouldn't have the willingness to fight or anything like that, but
Well, they absolutely did, but
they wouldn't have the train. There's almost no chance that a slave from the Deep South is going to have any kind of education on how to be a soldier.
right.
So he has to free them. He has to arm them and train them and then employ them. And realistically, that is almost to a T what a Green Beret does, right? Like they are the guys that are the best at going in, working with a local national force, training them up, and then employing them in combat. Like if you watch the movie The Green Berets, that's exactly what they're doing, right? Like they got a group of South Vietnamese soldiers that they train up. They train them up how to fight, and then they take them out and employ them. And it's usually like 1 or 2 Americans, right? And then the rest is, they even do that nowadays in Afghanistan, or they were when we were doing that in Afghanistan and Iraq. So
dry run after dry run,
right? So it's just it's a lot to do, and there's a reason why they're the best at it. It's because they practice it constantly, right?
Right.
So keeping that kind of similarity in mind, it's going to bring us to the next part, because obviously you can't just hop into an operation like that with no preparation. He's going to be preparing. Realistically, his whole life, but specifically for the last 20 years of his life, he has been putting in a lot of work to get ready for this. He's studying maps. He's got a very intimate knowledge of the Underground Railroad system. He's helped many people get their freedom up in Canada or northern states, and he's been doing that for decades. He gets census tracts of southern states and southern counties to see where the biggest population of concentration would be a better word, but biggest concentration of slaves would be, so he can Big Pop go and free them. He's got a big booster to his army.
Which I'm sure is constantly changing.
Oh, absolutely,
over 20 years.
Absolutely. And we got to think too, like if it's getting printed and there's no internet, so it's not like you're making a PDF and then uploading it to a cloud or something. Like you got to go get the actual census. He probably had very old information, to say the least. So that brings me to the point that I wanted to kind of hit on first with you, is all the prep work, even for a modern day operation, that goes in behind the scenes, the intel, the terrain detail, mapping, all that stuff. How important is that? Realistically.
Let's talk about your grunts, your men on the ground that are collecting this information. Let's talk about satellites. There's everything that you can think of that goes into planning an operation from the top to the bottom. Is there a force in readiness, people training, people constantly living this lifestyle, more than one person involved from more than one entity.
Across agencies, all the agencies, all the military branches, there's cross communication. Like in my mind, I look at it like a pyramid, right? The tip of the pyramid, the top of it, the pointy part top, that's the actual rate itself. And I feel like this is even, and again, this is not belittling anything, the dangers of being on that rate. It's just how much work gets put into it time frame wise, right? You could even do that with, I feel like you could do that with D-Day. Honestly, you put the D-Day invasion at the tippy top of that pyramid, and then you work your way down to like logistics, and then you work your way down from there to the bigger section, the intelligence. And intelligence, I feel, would be the base of that pyramid, because that's where the most time goes. Even if the operation is months long, I guarantee you it was a lot longer getting ready to do that operation.
And then take all that information in that one great big pyramid and then put it in one little tiny tip of a spear and make it happen.
Right. And when you're trying to be, as like a lot of the special forces guys like to reference themselves, they're not the sledgehammer, they're the scalpel. They're pinpoint accurate. When you're planning for a mission to have pinpoint accuracy on the execution, that means there's even more planning and preparation that goes into it, and that's even to the unit actually doing. Now we're migrating into like tape houses and kill houses, and you're talking about going through, like, for instance, people that don't know, a tape house, you let's say you get a blueprint or a overhead image of the place that you might be raiding. You will get the exact specifications of that building. Down to how big the closet is on in the children's room. You know what I mean? Every little thing you can get right, you get right. You make a mock house of it, or a tape house if you're deployed and you don't have the...
You just lay it out on the ground.
You lay it out, but you're still being accurate. You're measuring everything 100%. And then over and over and over and over. I cannot stress how many times. This is just for regular infantry, too. This is not to even mention, you talk about guys that are of the utmost professionalism getting sent on these missions, because it takes that. You're on your own when you get over there. You won't have all the same assets that like a battalion of Marines is going to have.
Right. You're being just dropped off and you execute and you rescue yourself.
You have to be solid. You have to be solid. And you're talking about days, weeks, months worth of doing the same thing over and over again, so that you, like, by the time you go on a raid, you know down to a T where everybody is for every step of that actual raid in that building, whatever you're raiding, you know down to an exact T where you're aiming, what you're supposed to be guarding, how long it should take you to get here, what you need to be worried about before you get there, all kind of stuff.
And I know my job.
Right.
But in the event something happens to me, you also know my job.
Exactly.
So that you can know where I was going to be. Now you're filling in and going where I was supposed to be. It's just a continuous
and
thing.
So we have to think about John Brown, instead of having, you know, the entire U.S. government at his you know, on his side helping him plan this, he's doing it all by himself. Because keep in mind, you know, this is very much against the grain of what at least half of the country at the time thought was right. You know, I mean, they're very much against this. And he has a big hurdle to cross over. And not to mention, let's get into, you know, how big was the force he was planning on starting, not acquiring, but actually starting with.
So he wants to recruit and begin this operation with a group of approximately 4,500 men.
That's insane. That is huge.
That is huge.
And he's
That's
got to do it by himself.
All by himself. He's in charge. He's got to get them all.
And keep in mind too, he's planning on recruiting, you know, freedmen, right? Like people that were in captivity and have escaped to the north, or you know, black either Canadians or Americans that are living in the north and have always been free. Those are the people that he is trying to get to his side, get to his unit. And I have to be a realist here for a minute, because dude, I'm always down for a good fight, especially for Uncle Sam or for a moral cause. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
Always.
Right.
I will say this. If I had spent my life in captivity and then finally escaped and did that grueling journey from the South to Canada, and then this guy comes to me and talking, you know, obviously, like, morally, yeah, I want to help people escape. I want to help more people get here.
Right.
But you have a very good likelihood that it's not going to end out well. And if you don't get killed and you get captured, you will be going exactly back to what you just escaped from.
Right. And also at the same time, John Brown, think of this. He's got to recruit these guys, and he's got to explain to him what he's doing, but how much can you really explain without kind of giving away to the wrong person, say, your plans? You don't want to blow it. He doesn't want to blow it.
No.
But you got to tell people, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And this is where we're going.
Right.
Are you with me?
Right. And man, you know, understandably, he doesn't get as many people as he wants, because
Not even close.
I say understandably though, because I don't know if I'd be like, dude, no, I don't think so. Like, I don't think I'm going with you, man. I love your mission, but I just got out of there. I'm not going back.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I did my time over there. I'm not about to do more.
So he ends up actually making his way to Harpers Ferry with 21 men.
And that's a substantial difference.
Right.
And just to let everybody know, we won't go into great detail about Harpers Ferry, but know that it's in between the fork of the Shenandoah and Potomac rivers. They're big. They move fast. Flooding is a big deal in that area too, so it can just randomly be moving a lot quicker.
And it's a slave state at the time. It's Virginia.
It's Virginia. It's not West Virginia. So John Brown is in enemy territory.
Not friendly.
Right? So. Not only that, he has no help, no assets. I mean, it's not like he can't call an evac chopper to come in and give him a ride out. He can't call in artillery. He can't, none of those. He doesn't even have a medic with him, right? So if things start going wrong, he's on his own. And not only that, the only way in and out of that town is either across the bridges that cross the rivers,
Right,
or up the hill that the town is on. And for everybody, just so they know that this hill kind of comes down like to use another triangle here, that comes down kind of like a rounded off triangle.
it's
right?
like an arrowhead almost.
Exactly.
And the armory's kind of at the bottom.
At the bottom of it, next to the water. So just so you know, if you get cut off from that bridge, you have an entire town to escape through before you actually can start feeling like, okay, I might get out of here.
But they have the high ground.
And they have the high ground.
But
and,
you have
more
the ammo.
people, and more people.
You have
too.
the weapons and ammo too. So
Yeah,
maybe he will do it.
the small victories here and there. We'll see. I don't know. I feel like John Brown should have known his limitations before he attempted. I mean, listen, thank God everything went the way it did. You know, like
Right.
But just from a military perspective, I'd be canking this one.
It's looking grim. Canking it. Yeah.
So he makes his way with 21 men, and it's made up of various various people from all over the place. Some slaves, some former slaves, some of the men are his sons. But that being said, he has his force, and they're going to start making their way to Harpers Ferry. They're gonna take a few hostages along the way. They're going to free some slaves along the way. And this is, when I say along the way, I mean like the night of heading there, right? Like, oh, let's stop off at this house. Just make a quick pit stop. Let's capture these guys. Let's let these guys go. Oh, by the way, let's also grab George Washington's sword. Big thing. I thought that was kind of funny.
That's interesting.
It's almost like the guide on, we can get the guide on before we go, kind of a thing. But
I'd feel like I was in pretty good shape if I had something like that.
Right. It's George Washington's, you got to feel good. But that's a side note to get back into the actual analysis of this. He has, he's made his way. He's gotten his hostages. He's freed the slaves. He's on his way to Harpers Ferry, and around 11 p.m. on October 16th, they're actually in the city. They cross the bridge into town, and they're going to cross a railroad bridge that's actually no longer there. You can see the pillars of it still, though, which is very cool. They still have the pillars of the bridge there. It's just no longer there's no longer like a structure on top of them.
Just history all around us.
Right. Now, first thing I want to mention here at 11 p.m., this is one thing to know about Harpers Ferry. It's dark. All of that area, that West Virginia area, Northern Virginia, I lived there for a brief time before I moved into my current house down in Northern Virginia. And, dude, when it gets dark out there, it is freaking dark.
Well, there's no lights on the surrounding mountains. And,
No.
1859.
Trees everywhere. Like, it's dark, man.
Yeah.
And they're going to cross into town. Keep in mind, no flashlights. If they're gonna use any light, that's light by flame, right? So some sort of like torch or lantern or something. Everything seems like it's just getting more and more difficult for them.
Are you thinking about starting your own podcast or YouTube channel, but find yourself in need of things like a logo, animation for your videos, or digital marketing materials? If so, Colby and I recommend using Fiverr. Fiverr bills itself as the world's largest digital services marketplace, with over 11 million users in 190 countries. With Fiverr, you can find anything you need when it comes to graphics and design, digital marketing, writing and translation, video and animation, music and audio, programming and tech, business, and trending data. A whole world of freelance talent at your fingertips. Fiverr gives you quality work done quickly and at prices that work for every budget. And for your peace of mind, when commissioning one of their freelancers, you get protected payment every time, meaning you won't pay for something until you approve the work, so you never have to worry that your money is going to waste. With Fiverr, you also enjoy 24/7 support. Visit AmericaFogOfWar.com and follow the link Shop Fiverr, located in the menu at the top of the homepage, and find the right solution for you today. Well, he did have one good idea. Cut the telegraph lines.
Thank you for bringing that up. This is a huge thing. So
this is communication.
On their way in, they do realize that, listen, word could get out. We need to put a little security blanket there, or at least a little buffer, a time buffer, if you will, between us and the U.S. government in case they find out about this before we're ready for them to find out about this. So they do. They cut telegraph lines leading to Maryland and Virginia. Now, one thing to note. When Brown does enter the town, he's only going to enter the town with 18 men. He's going to leave a few men on the other side of the bridge to kind of keep security, which we would do that even.
Makes sense.
Now because here's the thing you have to understand. You always need a way to get out, right? Like it is important to get in there and accomplish the mission. But if you don't have an avenue of egress, like we need to reevaluate that mission.
Right.
Unless it's a known suicide mission. We're not going. It's getting scrubbed.
It's almost at the same time as like a cordon, like a surrounding the area. It's also, I think, with such few men involved, I think it's more of like it could be like a listening post, observation post. Anybody coming? Who's coming into town?
Like an OP, dude. Like an OP. You got some guy out there, some Lance Cooley, just stand and watch and ready to give word back if he sees something coming. Very good idea, but needless to say. He's now moving into town with less men than what he even had before, which is a very small amount. I mean, you're talking full-on squad plus right now.
Yeah.
So, squad plus, platoon, super minus, right? You do not have... I mean, the United States, to put this in perspective, the United States Marine Corps would not do a raid with that size unless it was like one building, one-story building. Like because there are so many things you have to secure to actually like clear it. You know what I mean? It's not just room by room. Like, it's not like you clear a room and then leave it because someone can come right back into that room. You have to hold security over that area that you've just taken.
Right.
You also have to hold security to the outside, like you said, like a cordon. Make sure no one else is getting ready to jump into the fight. And he's going to do all of that in a town with 18 men, and you've got all kinds of two-story buildings and all kind of like different places people can be. The challenges are mounting quickly.
So something happens, like you just said, really quickly. The first shot's fired. While crossing the bridge into the town, there was a baggage handler, and they ordered him to halt. He's the baggage handler for the train station. He said, halt. He doesn't halt. He runs. Naturally, you're in the middle of the night.
I'm going to be honest with you. If that was me, I'd probably do the same thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And so what do? Do you let this guy, you can't see who he is, do you let him run and give away, maybe he saw,
spill the beans, yeah.
Maybe he sees 18 men in the dark with rifles. Do you let him go or do you fire the shot? And what happened was he fired the shot, and this actually turned out to be a man by the name of Hayward Shepherd, and he was a free black man, and he was ironically the first casualty of the raid.
Yeah, and that point goes to show too that there are going to be certain times in any mission, whether it's a raid or whether it's a full-on battle, you're going to have to make a very split-second decision, right. And sometimes it's this situation here alone is one of those moments where it's like you have a very short window to decide, and it's kind of hard to distinguish between what's right and wrong depending on which angle you're coming from, right? Because if you are John Brown and you're thinking of the freedom of millions of people, right, and it getting snuffed out immediately, one life might be worth that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you also have to be very sure when you want to shoot at somebody because, like you said, even though Hayward Shepherd isn't a slave, he ideally, like at least symbolically, he is who he is. He is who John Brown is trying to help.
True.
Right? Like
True.
It really much goes against his cause, and you have to keep in mind too that that's very much a propaganda issue as well, right? Because he in his efforts ends up killing a black man. Well, you might, depending on who puts that news out, you might lose a lot of support.
How do you convince somebody that it's got to get worse before it gets better, kind of thing?
Yeah. So, and this also goes to show too that listen, you can plan and plan and plan, but every mission is gonna immediately change from what you've planned for. I mean, that's why you do so much practice. That's why you have so many backup plans built in. And okay, if this happens, I do this, and if this happens, I do this. Because honestly, as much as you practice and prepare in intelligence, you can't see the future, and something is going to happen. Things happen. It's crazy how it works, but it does. So, needless to say, they're crossing the bridge. They have killed they've shot Hayward Shepherd, and they're moving on into the town. So now I do know this. This is one nice thing about Brown taking this town at night, right? Or at least taking the armory at night. There's only one guy on watch in the armory.
That's a better note,
right? So 18 verse 1 sounds a lot better. They end up catching the guard. They subdue him. They get the keys to the armory. Things are moving right along. What happens next, though? Because as we find out, nothing's going to go smooth from this point on.
Right. So we are 2 hours and 50 minutes roughly into this. He started, this is about 11 o'clock. Now we're at about 1:15 in the morning. On the 17th now, the eastbound B&O Express train from Wheeling, Virginia, actually, I'm sorry, has to pass through Harpers Ferry towards Baltimore. Brown and his men, they stop the train. So he's anything that he comes across, I feel like he's addressing it. He has to, because he's involved all the way now. So
you're committed. You're committed. You can't just let something slide at this point.
Right. So his men, they stop. They board the train. Brown talks to the passengers for about an hour, and then Brown told them, "Hey, you can go. You can depart. Go ahead and leave."
So let's talk about that for a minute, because right there, when I was doing the research for all of this stuff with the narrative episode, I searched and searched and searched to see if I could find other, theories on why John Brown would let these people go. Because honestly, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. If you've stopped the train, dude, let's think about it this way. If we were in John Brown's position in Afghanistan, and you were in a fire team, for instance, and you got separated from your unit, and you're just out in the middle of Afghanistan by your lonesomes, right?
Right.
Anybody you let into your building, would you ever let them leave that building until the rest of your guys showed up or until you left?
No chance.
Not happening,
Especially
right?
if they're heading south.
Dude, honestly, even if they're the nicest people in the world, doesn't mean that they're going to rat you out, but the Taliban might catch them and do horrible things to their family until they do give you up, right? So, like, no, you're not letting anybody leave. You're not killing them, but you're not letting anybody leave, you know? He lets them leave. I don't understand it. He has to know, even with the telegraph lines cut, word is going to get out. But needless to say, he lets them go. And then it's a little bit later on, because of those cut telegraph lines, which did serve a little bit as a time buffer. They were successful. I mean, it's good to be prepared where you can be. It's not until 10:30 that the railroad president is going to notify the Virginia militia, the governor of Virginia, the U.S. Secretary of War, and then also none other than the president of the United States. So John Brown's situation has just gone from bad to as bad as it can get.
Everybody knows now. So, back in Harpers Ferry, but he doesn't know that this happened, right? So he's in Harpers Ferry. He's now, the armory employees are starting to show up to work, and Brown and his men take hostages. They're coming in.
Well, yeah, they think they want to show up for work like it's just a normal day.
Yeah, they're coming in, but they don't know it. And here's John Brown and his men. Captures them. They take over the fort. Now it's John Brown's fort.
Right. At the time, it's an engine house, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
it's
we've
a fire
both,
engine house.
We've both been there. So just to give people an idea, this thing is like, honestly, it's not much bigger than one of those pre-made sheds you can buy from like Home Depot or Lowe's, you know, for your yard. You know which ones I'm talking about, the pre-made sheds?
Yeah. I mean, they're long. I mean, it's got had 3 doors on it, 3 wooden doors.
Like three doors. It's brick, and it. I mean, man, at the most, it might be like 10 by 20 feet.
Yeah, it's not that big.
It's not big at all. It's small.
But it's his now.
It is his. He's got it. And listen, he also has men throughout the armory as well, because there's many armory buildings down there in that area. A lot of it looks different now. Just over the years, there was floods and all kind of stuff. Also, the Civil War is getting ready to happen, and it's going to jack up Harpers Ferry as well. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that gets changed and is not the same as when John Brown was in the town.
So once again, he's split up between a few different buildings.
Right. He's already got a small force, and he's splitting them up more. And listen, in modern day military, like that might work in that scenario if you had today's weapons, right?
Yeah.
Because you can put a lot of rounds downrange, as an individual or as a buddy team, right? 2 guys can handle it for a minute.
Right.
You got muzzle loaders back then, or if in best case scenario, a Sharps carbine where it's a breech loader, but you're still going one at a time.
And you got prisoners.
Right.
Who's got to watch the prisoners?
You got to keep eyes on them. You got to keep security on your avenues of egress. Those bridges are at this moment in time, the most important thing, at least I believe, the most important thing for John Brown and everybody in this story is controlling those bridges. Because the minute you lose control of those bridges, your day has just ended.
And he
It's
doesn't
over.
He doesn't know that it's already on its way. It's
Right.
already been sent. It's already, something's coming.
Right. So needless to say, he's got his forces split up. He's got 10 hostages kept with him there in the engine house, as well as a few other men from his force. And then at around 11 a.m., you're gonna have I apologize, not 11 a.m. At around 12 p.m., volunteer militia units are going to begin forming up in Harpers Ferry. And then it's not too much longer after that, they're going to take control of those bridges.
So at about 10:30, telegraph goes out. Some information goes out.
Mhm.
And then by 12 o'clock, so we're
It's
an hour and a half. That's
Hour and
pretty
a half.
quick.
I mean, that is quick considering they don't have cell phones or the internet or anything. This is telegraph and couriers.
Right, right.
So yes, it's moving fast, and not to mention they don't have planes either. They're getting there by train. If someone's showing up from a distance, they're getting there by train or by horse.
And they're
So,
there by 12. is
like
what you're saying.
an hour and a half later is when the first ones show up, and then I don't know when the last ones show up necessarily, but I do know it's around that 12 p.m. marker that they're going to take control of those bridges back from John Brown's men.
So he's not getting out.
And now, yeah, you ever seen those mob movies where like the mobsters have a bar and then this motorcycle gang comes in and they're causing all these problems, and then like the mobster starts walking towards the door, like, oh, the guy's making fun of him, oh, you want to leave, and he locks the door and he goes, no, now you can't leave.
That's
it's
right.
like one of those moments, right? Like, yeah, you thought you were scary. You can't leave now.
They just flip the switch.
Who's scared now? You know what I mean? Like, so it's very dynamic, the battlefield in general, but this one it's stark contrast. You know, moments before this, he had the upper hand, and very quickly he becomes the prey.
In broad daylight.
In broad daylight, too. So now him and his men are locked up in what's known as John Brown's fort now. And then what happens?
So we got a bit of a standoff here, and people are forming. Everybody knows everything's cut off. Everything's moving into him. So let's go ahead about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A gunfight breaks out. Brown's party and the militia are going at it. They're exchanging gunfire.
Listen, and let's touch on this, too, though. Those militia aren't trained soldiers. I mean, neither is John Brown's men, but there's a difference between fighting for your life and then being in militia and showing up and trying to take care of
they're
in
locals.
their mind is like a pest at this point.
Right, they're locals, maybe from the surrounding area. They're coming in. Everybody's got a rifle back then. The militia is kind of a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, we're in peacetime. What are we doing? What's going on here? I didn't expect, I wouldn't expect anybody to come and shooting at me.
Well, they don't know
from this.
They don't know John Brown's intention, right? Like, they don't know John Brown and his men. Like, they are, not only are they committed, like you said, like you're full on in, they're fighting for their lives, but they're at a place where they're ready to take that aggression all the way to the top. You know what I mean? Like, full on combat. We're ready for it. And when you're ready for it, like the mindset, you are ready for that, you really don't have a problem hesitating getting there.
Right.
If you're not ready for that in your mind, like you haven't planned or thought, before this moment, hey, we're getting ready to go fight to kill right now, and then it just meets you all of a sudden aggressively, it's going to throw you off your game for sure. It's definitely going to have an effect on you. Do you love America Fog of War and want more of it? If so, Brett and I would love it if you became a member of the America Fog of War Patreon. Visit americafogofwar.com and follow the link Become a Member located in the menu at the top of the homepage and pick from one of our 3 membership subscription options. As a member, you can enjoy ad-free early access to all of our free episodes, like this one, as well as gain access to not 1, but 2 extra episodes a month, and join either Brett or myself on a monthly Zoom call where you can help us make decisions pertaining to future episodes of America Fog of War, discuss war movies and books, and talk about some of your favorite American battles and campaigns, hip pocket class style. Your membership subscriptions are what enable us to bring you the content you love every month. Help us grow this podcast and become part of the team today at americafogofwar.com.
So the militia, they're unprepared. You show up as a group together. You feel like this is a command presence. We can handle this, but really unprepared for the aggressive nature of John Brown and his men, what's going to happen. So they're disorganized. Some of these guys are still drunk in the morning or had already started drinking that morning. And they really just kind of cowered away from that engine house, which is now John Brown's fort.
Honestly, too, and you can't harp on the guys too much. I know, you like to think like the militia shows up and really, just gets to work.
It's a show of force.
But at the time, man, they were farmers. They weren't soldiers. They would get together and shoot their guns maybe once a month, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so.
And maybe do a little marching. But nowadays people take for granted the institutional values and principles that like the American military has, for instance, that give their soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, the fortitude to be like, I'm here to fight. I'm going to do the right thing when no one's watching. And I don't care how bad the fight gets. I will not cower. I'm going to stand here and do my job. And it's going to take a lot to get through me. Kind of a mentality. That's generations and generations of not only knowledge, but like cultural carrots and sticks. I mean, there's all kind of things built into that. And John Brown's force, unfortunately, doesn't have those generations behind them building that, right?
Right.
And neither do these Virginians. So, needless to say, I know we talked about John Brown's men being in other towns in the armory other buildings in the armory throughout the town. None of them are coming to the fort to help them. They've either been subdued or tried to flee. I have read that some tried to swim and drowned. I don't know if that's actually true or not. So please, all you guys out there that really know the story well, don't jump on me too hard. But I do remember reading that somewhere. Take it with a grain of salt.
So when the militia was outmatched, what happened after that? Who did they call?
Well, this is always a point of pride because anytime you hear the Marine Corps name dropped, it's always like, oh, what did we do?
Right.
But the president's going to actually dispatch a squad-sized element, essentially a squad-plus-sized element, and we'll call them a detachment, let's say, of U.S. Marines from the Washington Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., to go take care of this problem in Harpers Ferry. And side note here, pretty interesting, it will tie back into the story later. The man that's charged to lead them is none other than, at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee
of the United
U.S.
States
Army.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, the U.S. Army, because this is pre-Civil War, guys. Keep in mind, it's peacetime. This is still a good bit before we actually get into it. I mean, Abraham Lincoln's not even the president.
Right. Robert E. Lee's a U.S. combat veteran himself.
Yeah, he is. He's very, and he had a lot of experience in the American-Mexican War, Mexican-American War.
Right.
I want to call it Mexican War all the time now, just because of having read all those books, like researching it. But that being said, he's very experienced. He's got a detachment of professional U.S. Marines coming to take care of the job, and it doesn't take too long. They show up. I mean, nowadays it would take you about, I think, roughly an hour and a half from Harpers Ferry to D.C. It wouldn't take them that much longer to get there on train. And when they show up, Lee's going to offer Brown, surrender options, right? You can come out, you can surrender, you will be tried, but at least no more of your men will die. But what happens?
He refuses. He's barricaded. He is not accepting any terms under any condition to surrender. So the doors of the engine house are barricaded, and they're firing upon the Marines. And now the Marines are
full-on Alamo style.
Full-on Alamo. Just, we're barricaded. We are fighting to the death at this point. So the Marines now are involved in something which I think they knew they may have been walking into because the militia was already fired upon. So now the Marines are coming in hot and ready to go.
Also, too, in peacetime, those guys were pretty jazzed about getting the chance to do some fighting.
Oh, well, yeah.
I know I would have been,
This is my chance.
Right. Here we go. So they're firing at them. But they have to break into this barricaded building. Now, one thing I will say about John Brown's fort is, even though it's not that big, it does look very sturdy. It's made of brick. The doors that are on it are very thick wood, big iron, rivets and all this stuff holding them together. It's a, especially, I bet when it was fairly new, I bet it was a very, to say the least, a very intimidating or daunting thing to have to deal with while under fire at point blank range.
Right. But in typical fashion, while the Marines are under fire, they can do their jobs, right?
Right. And so, let's touch on that, because they start with sledgehammers, correct?
They start with sledgehammers, make no progress, and they find a ladder. Like, now let's ram this thing.
A battering ram.
Ram.
Hey, you grab this. Grab this part. You grab this part. You grab this part.
So they're gonna battering ram, like, break their way into this.
It almost sounds like a Looney Tunes cartoon, doesn't it?
It kind of does.
When you picture the 12 Marines holding onto one ladder and backing up together and run. I just could see it in a cartoon. I don't know why.
Well, you got the Marines that are doing this, and then you got the Marines that are also providing support, covering fire, and what have you.
Absolutely.
So it takes a lot.
But here's the thing: you got to be able to improvise, adapt, and overcome.
That's right.
Like, the sledgehammer is not working. Let's find something that will, something that will. And the best way to do this is to do it as quickly as possible, because we are under fire. So let's not dilly-dally. Let's get the job done.
So you have a lieutenant and 12 Marines making their way into this building, and they finally break the doors. They make entry, but they can only make entry one at a time.
And another thing about that is, it's not even one entry at one person at a time, but it's one person at a time on their hands and knees. Right? So
right.
Really in a vulnerable state when you enter the fatal funnel. And for those of you that don't know what the fatal funnel is, if you're breaching a room, if you're doing a kinetic breach into a room, and there's going to be hostile forces inside waiting to greet you, picture a funnel where the narrow end comes off of the door and it widens out to the two back corners of the room, right? It's like the funnel is leading to the doorway that exits the building.
Because everyone's aiming at
Right.
that doorway.
And anytime you're in that funnel, you are absolutely in a kill zone. And the idea is to get out of that funnel as quick as possible. Now, that's a lot of modern day tactics and principle that's been learned through a lot of trial and error. I don't think the Marines at this time were aware of the fatal funnel at all. But that being said, to kind of give you an idea of how dangerous that situation is, being on your hands and knees, you're not going to get out of there quick. And you also want as many guns as there in the building as you can get, as quickly as possible. And if you're crawling one man at a time, it's not going to be that fast. So take us on. What happens next?
Yeah, certainly. So this young lieutenant, Lieutenant Green, he's the first to enter the engine house. And I'll quote this. His experience says, I brought my saber down with all of my strength upon Brown's head. He was moving as the blow fell, and I suppose I did not strike him where I intended, for he received a deep saber cut in the back of his neck. That's
a bad place to get, chopped by a saber. But listen, there's a lot to that quote, and I do recommend people going out and looking at this stuff because I find it fascinating. I find reading the firsthand accounts of these guys. I could sit there and do it all day. But for those of you that want the modern day speech put to the words, I'll kind of sum up for you like the little middle section here that we've kind of left out. He's gonna mention that after he hits Brown's gonna fall to the ground. He's gonna roll over onto his back, and he's gonna have in his hands a Sharp's cavalry carbine. Now, he thinks, he doesn't know this for sure, but he thinks Brown had just fired the weapon right before he had hit him in the neck because the Marine that entered the building behind him actually is wounded. And I don't know if it seems to me from the quote, it doesn't seem like Lieutenant Green, like when he first came into the building, went immediately to John Brown. It sounds like he came in the building and like approached someone else. I believe it's one of the hostages. And then the hostage tells him, there's Osawatomie, there's John Brown, right? So he believes that John Brown had just fired his weapon because the Marine that came in behind him got shot in the gut. That Marine ends up dying pretty quickly.
This sounds like the fog of war to me.
It does. Like, you can't really...
All this happening.
Like, that's the thing, too, is that's another thing to realize, man. When you're in a fight, you can remember things very well, but sometimes they get jumbled. And sometimes, there's just going to be parts that you don't remember. And then there'll be sometimes things you remember vividly. It's just the dynamic and just what you're able to take in and what you're not able to take in, and do you get that tunnel vision? Or it's right. There's so many things that can happen.
Well, we certainly do remember moments, not days.
Exactly.
So there's certain moments that are gonna happen. And
this is important too. This is why you practice things like debriefing, because it helps you recall. It helps you recall what went right, what went wrong, and get better at what you're doing. But he'll go on with the quote, and Tommy, why don't you pick that up for us?
The sword I carried was a light uniform weapon, and either not having a point or striking something hard in Brown's accoutrements did not penetrate. The blade bent double.
Candy cane style.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a bad day, dude. If you're fighting for your life and you go to stab the guy you're trying to kill you, and your sword just bends over like a candy cane, I wouldn't be too excited about it.
I mean, this is really hand to hand.
It is.
I mean, face to face.
You got to, and if you guys out there ever get a chance to see John Brown's fort, you'll realize there was no other option except hand to hand in a building that size.
It's like a fist fight in a phone booth. Kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, this is super interesting to note here, because the truth is if you are doing, if you're from the Marines' perspective, if you're doing a forced entry onto a building, to take care of a problem in that building, it takes a lot less time than what you think. I mean, it happens quickly. It happens fast, right? This assault, it only lasts 3 minutes. And in that time, let's talk about this. In that time, there was 1 Marine killed, 1 Marine wounded, 2 of Brown's raiders were killed, and the rest were taken prisoner. We have another firsthand account here from one of the enlisted Marines there that day, and this is pretty interesting to me. It's something it's something that I like to say I was thinking about before I read it, but if I'm being honest, I don't think I really was. But it's very enlightening and also important to consider this, because this Marine's he's gonna make the point that the assault that day was not the only tense moment, and that actually what comes afterwards was more scary to him than what the actual assault was like.
Well, he describes in more simpler terms the excitement and the chaos of the
Right.
entire scene, the entire event.
Right. So let's look. This is coming from that enlisted Marine, and this is what he had to say. Quote, "Some were wounded and others dead or dying. They were greeted with the execrations, and only the precautions that had been taken saved them from the exasperated crowd." This dude had a freaking vocabulary for being enlisted. Good lordy.
Nowadays, you'd say, "Oh, it was crazy."
All right, listen. I am going to finish this, but then I'm going to try to re-sum up what I've just read to you where it's more coherent in layman's terms.
Okay.
The exasperated crowd, many of whom had relatives killed or wounded by the desperate gang of cutthroats. Nearly every man carried a gun, and the cry of shoot them, rang on every side. Needless to say, you're in a slave state, in a slave town, trying to, by force, take weapons and free slaves. And not only that, they killed their mayor. They've killed a few of their relatives. You know, your Uncle Joe down the road, you shot him when he was trying to stop you from coming into the armory or whatever. You've got their cousin prisoner inside that building with
Now
you.
you have Marines killed in action.
Right.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot of emotion flying around, and the crowd is pissed, right? And they want to lynch that Joker, man. They want to lynch John Brown. They want him dead now. No trial, no nothing. Now, and the reason that's important is if you are going to be, if you have the aims of being a professional soldier or a professional Marine or anything, in a professional sphere, especially in the military sense, you got to be able to control what you need to be able to control. And in this situation, the Marines needed to be able to control the town in a situation, right? You have to have a way to handle that. And preferably you do it without pointing guns at people, because
Right.
the minute you do that, it's usually not going to turn out the way you want it to, and there's no going back from it, right? And it will immediately escalate the problem if it does go the wrong way. Sometimes it doesn't.
And you only
Sometimes-
have a squad.
right, right.
There's a small squad of Marines
Right.
already wounded and killed. So
Yeah, you've got casualties, you got all kind of stuff.
you have to maintain command presence. You have to maintain the support of one another to gain control of the situation.
But needless to say, they were able to do that. They get John Brown locked up, and
People come from out of nowhere.
yeah, you get people like all over the place now wanting to interview John Brown, and really that's there's this theory that John Brown, the reason he let that train go and the reason he didn't leave once he had the armory, because he gets into the army very early on. Like he accomplishes his mission very early on in the night,
Right.
and then just camps. And I've read in certain places where he's waiting for people that are still in slavery at that moment in the area to get word of it and then make their way to him so he can jump off with a few extras. But I almost find that hard to believe, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to wait. You think they're going to get here faster than the U.S. government?
They're going to travel on foot.
Do
in the
they
middle
have a
of the night?
telegram going directly to their house?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, no, they're not going to get there faster. And but that's one of the theories that's floating. The other theory is that John Brown intentionally does this. John Brown intentionally gets himself into a situation where he can get caught and then be executed because he knows that, well, his message will hit a lot harder in that circumstance, especially if he can put himself on the moral high ground. And that's exactly what he does with these interviews.
Well, maybe he can get caught, win favoritism, and be freed.
Or that. And listen, you have to remember that now we're going to delve into some other stuff, but he had extreme faith in God and in his religion and his destiny in life, and that plays a huge role into it as well.
Well, the entire the northern states, they viewed him as a martyr, really. For freedom.
Yeah, and it's because of those interviews that he does after he's captured, which turns their opinion on it. So at first, when everybody hears about this at first, I think the general consensus is negative across the board. It's not until these interviews start coming out,
Right.
where you get people in the North are like, wait a minute now, this guy's onto something here,
Right.
And I mean, we go into detail on that in the narrative episode. So if you are out there and interested in a little bit more of that, please feel free to listen to America Fog of War, episode 1, season 1.
I highly recommend. Being a U.S. Marine and fighting for my country is one of the things in my life I am most proud of. Although there are so many positives that came from my experience in the Marine Corps, like many of you, I had another battle I had to fight when my service was done. It's no secret that PTSD affects many active duty and former servicemen and women every day, as well as their family members and the first responder community. If you or a family member is struggling with PTSD, Colby and I recommend looking into the Mighty Oaks Foundation for help in your battle with this condition. The Mighty Oaks Foundation is a faith-based veteran service organization that teaches combat veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress how to get beyond combat trauma and live their lives in the manner God intended. Many combat vets are unable to reintegrate back into civilian life, leaving their families to deal with the aftermath of broken homes and suicide at times. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these warriors are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Their mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find a new life purpose through hope in Christ and their resiliency and peer-to-peer recovery programs. More than 4,000 alumni have participated in Mighty Oaks programs, as they maintain one of the highest success rates of any recovery program in preventing veteran suicide and divorce. In fact, their programs are so successful that they receive hundreds of active duty military on official orders each year. Additionally, through a proactive effort, Mighty Oaks has provided resiliency programs to over 150,000 active duty troops on military bases worldwide. Find more information on the Mighty Oaks Foundation by visiting americafogofwar.com and follow the link Mighty Oaks Foundation located in the menu at the top of the home page. Never fight alone. Get some backup in your fight with PTSD today.
But needless to say, it's not too much longer after that John Brown is executed. He's tried and executed. Now, looking back on that, kind of some finishing thoughts, I feel like at least some of my big takeaways, and then we'll turn it over to you, Tommy, and you kind of give me some of your big ones.
Okay.
Understand the importance of preparation. Preparation is a huge deal when wanting to execute something like this, and you can put this towards anything in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be a military operation. It's easy to see in a military operation, but you need to spend more time making yourself or setting yourself up in a position to be successful than trying to actually be successful. You know what I mean? Don't just shoot from the hip. Don't just go out there with no plan and try to get after it, right? Like
Right.
you need to do your homework, and especially when you're going into combat, you definitely need to do your homework. The second thing is know your limitations. You always have to know your limitations, and you have to be realistic when knowing those limitations. It's easy. It is so easy, especially if it's like your first time going into combat. It's very easy to make yourself in your mind seem not invincible. I know most people know they're not invincible, but it's definitely easy in your mind to make it seem like you can do almost anything on a battlefield, when in truth, that's not the case. And you have to be very realistic in how you set up your expectations for that. And then lastly, man, I think the big thing is the big takeaway for me. When I look at this, there's so many things that John Brown does right, but there's so many things that he does wrong. Like he leaves the security across the bridge. That's great. What happened to them dudes? You know what I mean? Like you can't risk your life on something like that if you're not absolutely confident that everything that could go wrong will go wrong, and your guys are ready to handle it. You know what I mean? And for you guys, girls out there in high school, anybody, even college that is thinking about going into the military, just know, don't go into combat. Don't be sending your guys into combat unprepared. You yourself don't go into combat unprepared. And this is even down to the small unit level. You got to make sure all your bases are covered, and you do have to. I mean, Murphy's Law is a real thing when in combat. What can go wrong will go wrong. Be prepared for it.
That's right.
What are your big takeaways,
So
Tommy?
I think about it in a way where you look. What is my baseline? You have all the planning, and it's all about the setup. You have to set up. You have to plan. You have to practice Plan A. You also have to practice Plan B. And you have to practice Plan C. You have to have multiple avenues of approach as the same way you have to have multiple avenues of egress. However, in a combat scenario, when multiple things happen from multiple people, from multiple angles at the same time, you have to know, what is my baseline? Just like you have to know your limitations. What is my baseline? What do I actually have to get done? If I get these other objectives done, this is going to look good, and this is going to be great. But at a bare minimum, what is my baseline? What am I going to execute 100% fully all the way, no matter what?
Like prioritize your objectives.
Right. So some of these things are like, is it coming in quick or is it holding my ground? Is it getting in, getting out? It seems like with certain theories and certain things that John Brown did that I don't, even me, like reading the bit that I have, like, I don't know. I really don't even have a full idea of what actually
Like what he's thinking.
would have been right.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
like
what was his real intentions?
Right.
Was what happened what was supposed to happen, or was it what happened not really planned, and he ends up at the end of this dead? But I think, like what you said in the narrative, it really kind of sets. Maybe this is the setup to the setup, because I said it was all about the setup.
Right,
This
right.
is the setup to the setup that led to what we're going to see in just 2 years from now, from 1859 to 1861.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't know which camp I fall on, man. I don't know if he like I don't know if this was all part of the plan or if
Right.
this is just how it ended up. But it's hard not to think it was part of the plan, because, like, you know, even the things he's known for, like his big quote and stuff like that, it's like he was already thinking along this line. That being said, let's close it up with this: biggest win, biggest loss for John Brown. What did he do best? What did he do worst? Two things, like one for each.
Biggest win is that he survives the entire ordeal, although he's wounded,
Mm-hmm.
and that he can now continue to get his word out.
Right.
He has
right.
the opportunity to pull this off, survive it, and then have his word published.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes this whole entire event, planning from 20 years, execution, failure or success, whatever you want to view it as, and I think he accomplishes his mission. So I think that's the win part of this for him,
Okay. All right.
even though it may cost him his life.
And for me, I feel like I'm in the same camp. I think it's the same thing we're talking about. I'm just going to word it a little differently. For me, I feel the biggest win is the interviews and how he conducts himself in the interviews, because that's really what is going to turn. You know, sometimes it doesn't take a bullet to win a war. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it really is propaganda, or how you set yourself up. Like, you know, do we set ourselves up on the moral high ground, or do we have a cause that people can rally behind? I think, you know, I think, which is in a nutshell what you were saying, right? Like the
Right.
ability to be able to do that is the biggest win. And I agree with you. I think that if you look at John Brown's raid, realistically, operationally, he doesn't have many wins. And if he does have wins, they're small.
Yeah, but still, even though not big wins, he still planned, he still executed, he still
execute.
recruited,
Yep.
handled it, and he set out to do. He did what he set out to do.
At the end of the day, like he is the reason it gets accomplished. This is the kickoff point for the entire Civil War, which ends up freeing the American slaves. So at the end of the day, goal is accomplished
At the
and-
cost of one's life
Yeah, and listen,
is a big
for
accomplishment.
a cause that big, man, I'd say it's got to be worth it, though. You know,
Absolutely.
And then if we move back to like that was his biggest win. Where's his biggest fail? What do you think he did? Like what it was like in the preparation and the execution. What area did he drop the ball the most? You think?
From a John Brown standpoint or a tactical standpoint?
Let's go tactical first, and then if we need more, we'll go John Brown.
Tactical, he could have pushed it back. He could have delayed it, because
And there's no actual deadline on this.
there's no deadline. Who knew that this was coming?
Right.
Nobody except for himself
Mm-hmm.
and the people he had recruited. So, do you take your plan of, say, 4,500 men, which is actually 21, and you say, forget it, I'm going live and I have to do this now? Or do you say, I'm going to push this back a few more months?
Now,
I'm going to wait till spring?
Maybe this is a concern. This is just a stab in the dark. This is completely guessing and you know, coming from me alone. I didn't read this anywhere. I could see this being a thing. He's older, right? He's older at the time. Maybe he's worrying about not being alive that long from now. You know, people didn't live as long back then.
True.
I mean, who knows, man? It could also be that he felt some kind of heavenly, like, sense of urgency, right? In his mind, heavenly air quotes, like sense of urgency, because in his mind, again, this is a God-given mission. So you're talking about the spiritual realm. You're talking about physical realm, his age, how much longer can he handle to do this?
Right.
And who knows? He also at the time, like before he actually does this raid, he does have the attention of federal authorities and certain senators and all kind of stuff. He's known. I mean, people know who John Brown is, and a lot of people don't like him because of what he's trying to do and what he stands for. So he does have eyes on him. Maybe he's trying to get it done before he gets caught. Who knows what that is? But I have to agree with you. You if you're planning on having 4,500 guys, and when you step off on the mission, you only have 21, something went terribly wrong.
Yeah. But lastly, my last thought on this situation is that you cannot really judge a man. Like, he was a man of his time, and that goes both ways. However, and that's a very touchy situation now. But look at him in his time. We're at the end of 1859. So in just 14 months or less from now, you have South Carolina seceding from the Union. In his mind, there may not have been time to delay, and so we can't really Monday night quarterback. And we have to say, this is the man of his time, and this was his rights and his feelings and his thoughts that he had no time left. So I can't really say what were his failures. I think he had to do what he had to do when he did it to make it right, and then I think it turned out right.
Right. And I'd have to. I mean, in a certain way, I do have to agree with you, because I've heard someone say before. Actually, I think it was Gary Edelman on like one of the old American Civil War, the American Battlefield Trust YouTube videos they have, but he said something along the lines of, "I always try to when dealing with like generals or leaders from the era, he's like, I always try to imagine myself not being able to do as good on my best day as they did on their worst day." Because you aren't there, you don't know, and you don't know what they're dealing with, and you don't know what's happening. Like you can know to a certain extent, but you don't. Like, there's things going on that we don't know anything about. You know what I mean? Did John Brown have a stomach bug? Well, we don't. There could be all kind of things happening that we're just unaware of.
True.
So I do have to say that there can be tactical failures for sure. I mean, there's a few instances I could just. The big one is splitting his force so much, also staying in town so long. Tactically, terrible decisions. Now, moving away from that, I don't know why he made those decisions, and I don't know his reasoning, like his purpose behind that, and I can't really judge him on it, because at the end of the day, he got done what he wanted to get done. Well, guys, I think that's it, man. I think we're wrapped up on that one. It was a good episode.
I think that's
talking about John Brown.
A great time spent here.
Make
Absolutely.
sure you, all of our listeners out there, make sure you tune in for the next episode of Hippocket History. It's always going to be a good time, and also make sure you listen to the debrief episode we have, kind of going in tandem with this. We do an interview with a U.S. Green Beret, and it's pretty good.
It's pretty good, I might say myself. So, yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, make sure you never miss new ones by subscribing to the show on your podcast app of choice. And if you want to help us out with growing the show and enable us to bring you better content and more of it, then Brett and I ask that you leave us a 5-star review. It does a lot in helping us. Brett and I thank you for listening, and until next time, stay frosty.